What's up everyone? I know it's week 7 now of Dragon Soul, so this guide is very much long overdue, but let's jump into it anyway, because in the last video we talked about some of the differences with reforging in Dragon Soul. In this one, let's go over some of the changes with the opener, as well as the rotation. Now this new rotation only really applies if you have the brand new Dragon Soul tier set, which at this point in the raid everybody should have. Even the LFR one is better than the full Heroic Fireland set, believe it or not, so definitely make sure you've got that. What we're most interested in is the 4-piece, as you'll read it there. Every single time a Shadow Fiend attacks or your Shadow Apparitions connect, you're going to get the maximum amount of orbs guaranteed. So 3 Shadow Orbs 100% of the time. As a result, it's that strong that it does introduce a brand new rotation. So whilst we still have the original case of applying dots, maintaining and refreshing, it really is now a burst phase on top of that. So adding a little bit of extra versatility to the Shadow Priest kit, which is a first, because it has always been a case of apply dots and then cry when a burst class comes across and just absolutely nukes it, and all your pad or all that trickle down rot damage just disappears. So this introduces the case of generating as many orbs as you can, consuming them in a really quick burst phase, and just pumping out a ton of damage. So let's discuss then. In the last video I mentioned we went over the reforging differences. We want to hit this certain haste cap point now for that next tick of Vampiric Touch. This changes a whole bunch whether or not you're receiving Dark Intent from a Warlock or not, so take that into consideration. And then after that, we want to actually put a lot of our reforging into Mastery, because that improves just how much damage each Shadow Orb will do. So you can imagine then, with 3 orbs constantly being popped, that adds up to a pretty significant number. So you'll see here when we go over the ability to obviously generate the orbs. Every orb is going to improve that damage by 40%. So it's a fairly hefty number, and hence why Mastery becomes a little bit more desirable. So in terms of the rotation, let's go over some of the changes. You're still going to go for that precast of a Mind Spike. That's now going to be followed up by 2 back-to-back Mind Flay 2s, which is when you interrupt it after the second tick of Mind Flays occurred. That'll give you the 5 Evangelism stacks that you need to then use your major cooldown afterwards. It's going to be a bit of a set rotation here in terms of Shadow Fiend needs to go out to get the ball rolling, to get those Shadow Orbs generated. Then I've got a macro that consumes or pops basically 3 things at once. Archangel is, Archangel begins, your engineering gloves are popped for the extra intellect, and then you've got Mind Blast being used right away with all those empowerments added in. So we want to try and cast Mind Blast at least 3 times during this Archangel window, and that's why we started off in that fashion. Now the next part's going to depend on how much haste you have. In normal circumstances, you're going to be looking to weave in about 4 Mind Spikes. So the Shadow Fiend attacks, you consume, you do that 4 times, you save 1 global for a Mind Flay, and then Mind Blast will be back off cooldown. The reason for this little break in between, the Mind Flay serves as 2 purposes. First of all, it helps the Shadow Fiend resync itself with your casts, so it's not desynced. You're not casting a Mind Spike when there's no orbs to be popped. You want to make sure that it's generating and you're consuming in that fashion. That's the first reason. The second reason being that you just need to start generating those Evangelism stacks again, so that afterwards you can seamlessly go back into applying those dots, and they've got the a max amount of Empowered Snapshot associated with them. So yeah, Mind Blast comes off cooldown again, that's where you use it. Back into your 4 Mind Spikes, same again, Mind Flay 2, that gives you the 5 Evangelism stacks. There's your 3rd Mind Blast, so we've managed to cram everything into that very short window, and then back into what you're probably very much used to, right? Out goes the Shadow Word Pain. We're going to use the Berserking now, not with the previous phase. We're going to use that now to empower our dots, because it's stronger as a cooldown there. And then it's business as usual. Now you'll see on this graphic that there is one little condition. With Bloodlust, you have so much haste that you can actually weave in 5 Mind Spikes rather than 4. Some other good examples would be, for instance, the haste buff on Madness when you get from Kelagos. Even if you do use Berserking, the only exception to that would be I use Berserking on Spine, because the only damage that matters is killing those little tendons. And that'll give me enough haste to hit the 5 Mind Spikes as well. So really the whole process of this new 4-piece is that an orb is generated and you're consuming, and it's just doing criminal amounts of damage. And you should find, especially on fights like Spine, you should be in the top 5, very much like an Arcane Mage or anybody else that can contribute a ton of on-demand burst damage. So that's how the opener looks. A little bit of a shake-up, but it is essentially a case of you still got your dot phase, but now you've got a burst phase on top of that. And the rules and regulations, I guess, around this is that you need to always make sure that Shadow Fiend is paired with Archangel. You don't want to use these cooldowns separately. They together are a perfect harmony. They really empower both to do the most amount of damage. Evangelism needs to be up to 5 stacks. I've seen a lot of discussion around like, oh, well on the Traxian I can't get the Shadow Fiend out. Look, I agreed it personally. It is what it is. It's only going to get quicker with this damage buff coming out, and every week getting a little bit faster as a result. But you really want to make sure that you've got those 5 Evangelism stacks, so the Archangel, when paired alongside the Shadow Fiend, does the most possible. As you'll see here, I've separated the cooldowns into 2 separate categories. So I use the Engineering Gloves with the Archangel, the Berserking with my dots. Obviously, a very case by case. It's not always going to be up and available for you to use it in that fashion. But those are sort of the light rules that I like to follow. And then I've just highlighted one of the talents that makes it possible, because you'll notice very quickly, well, hang on a minute, Archangel and Shadow Fiend have very different cooldowns. You look at Shadow Fiend, 4 minute, Archangel, 90 seconds in our case. And because of this talent Sin and Punishment, every single time your Mind Flay crits, it's going to reduce the cooldown by 10 seconds on that Shadow Fiend. So really, really helpful, and hence why in fights like Spine of Deathwing, you're most likely just going to be hitting Mind Flay all day, all night. It's the most important spell. It doesn't really matter about the extra damage that you can put out with your dots. You need to make sure that that Shadow Fiend is off cooldown, so when that tendon comes across, you can do the most damage possible. Now, obviously with the scaling and the time and the damage and all the gear that people have found after 7 weeks of progression, it's getting harder and harder to try and fit those windows in. So it's probably going to get to a stage where every single tendon dies in one go, as opposed to 1.5 or 2 like it used to be. But that is the most critical thing to do, is make sure you're spamming Mind Flay as often as possible to try and get those cooldowns up and aligned, and away you go. But that is, yeah, the changes to the rotation. Certainly did take a little bit of muscle memory to get my head around. Going into that first week, it was a bit of a case of, how does this all match up? I would spend a fair bit of time playing around with the dummies to get used to it first of all, then jump into some of those 5-man dungeons to get a real example, if you will, as to how you want to weave these in. But it really is a case of that is your opener, and when that cooldown comes back up and available again, back into it again you go. There is no real case of, do I only do this at the start and never again? Once those 2 cooldowns are back up, you're back into spamming those Mind Spikes, you're back into consuming all that burst damage, and doing something unique, which is kind of cool, because it's the first time that Shadow Priest has had that big change up, and it's going to be exclusive to this tier. So enjoy it whilst it lasts, and blast away.